This is a tutorial for ukulele players on understanding which chords we have available to us to play in a particular key. This video will be part of an ongoing series of videos and a YouTube playlist looking into understanding music and how it works with the ukulele player in mind. Every key in music has a scale associated with it and also has a set of chords built from the different degrees of that scale. These are what are known as the diatonic chords, the chords that belong to the key. And these will always sound good when played together, and hence are generally the collection of chords that we initially use when writing songs in a particular key. For this video we'll be looking at the key of C major, as it's the only key that has no sharps and flats in it and just uses the natural notes A through to G. It's also a popular key for ukulele players, as the ukulele is tuned in a C tuning, and hence the chord shapes are generally easier to play than in most other keys. I've made a separate tutorial on the major scale and how it's actually constructed. Please click on the card above or in the video description below if you're not familiar with this yet, as it will really help with understanding why particular notes are used in each scale. For the sake of this video, we're going to be looking at just the triad chords built from the scale of C major. These chords, C major, D minor, etc., are made up of just 3 notes. There are also 7th chords and other chord extensions and qualities that can be built from the same scale degrees, but in this tutorial we're just going to concentrate on the basic triad chords. I'll be looking at the 7th chords that are diatonic in a separate video. So in our key of C major, we have the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then finally a C again, which is an octave higher than the C we started on. These notes can also be referred to as the scale degrees 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and either 8 or 1 again. Each of these notes or scale degrees has a triad chord associated with it. In the case of a major key, the chords built from the scale degrees 1, 4 and 5 are always going to be major chords. So in the case of the key of C major, these chords would be C major, F major and G major, and would generally be labelled with just the letters C, F and G. We would refer to these as the 1, 4 and 5 chords of the key. We use Roman numerals to number the chords built from a scale, and for major chords we would use uppercase Roman numerals. So the chords built from the 1st, 4th and 5th degrees of the C major scale would be C major, F major and G major. The chords associated with scale degrees 2, 3 and 6 are always minor chords. So in the case of C major, these would be D minor, E minor and A minor, and these would generally be labelled with the chord letter and a lowercase m after the letter. For minor chords, we would generally use lowercase Roman numerals to number them. So the chords associated with the 2nd, 3rd and 6th degree of the C major scale would be D minor, E minor and A minor. The chord associated with the 7th scale degree is a slightly more unusual chord and is actually rarely used in its triad or 3-note form. This is because there are much more useful options once we get into the 4-note chords from the key. This chord is always a diminished triad. Like the minor chords, we would again use a lowercase Roman numeral to number the diminished chord, as it's still essentially a type of minor chord in essence. In the key of C major, this chord would be known as a B diminished triad, or just B diminished, or B dim. Diminished triads are generally labelled with a letter and the word dim after the letter, or sometimes you may see them labelled with the letter and a small circle like a degrees symbol after the letter. Like I said before, this chord is rarely used in its 3-note form, but it's good to know of its existence, as it will help with understanding its more useful extended forms later on. Lastly, we have scale degree 8, which is the same note and hence the same chord as for scale degree 1 again, the C major chord. We generally just refer to this as the 1 chord again. So we now have a 3-note chord or triad associated with all 7 degrees of our C major scale. The 1 chord, a C major, the 2 chord, D minor, the 3 chord, an E minor, the 4 chord, an F major, the 5 chord, G major, the 6th chord, A minor, and the 7th chord, B diminished. This format of the 1, 4 and 5 chords being major and the 2, 3 and 6 chords being minor and the 7th chord being diminished is always the same no matter which major key we are in. It's just the chord names will be relevant to that particular key. So if we were to play these diatonic chords we now have in pretty much any order, they will always sound good together, because they're built from the notes from the key and the scale of C major, and contain only those notes. Now you could just accept the information I have given you about which chords are always major, minor and diminished, etc. But for anyone interested, I will now show you how the scale actually tells us itself what chords we can use. Firstly, if we were to write out the scale degree notes of the C major scale from C to C, and then also add D, E, F and G again afterwards, and then we number the scale degrees accordingly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, in order to find our one chord, we take the note from scale degree 1, which in this case will be a C, and then we skip a note and we take the note from scale degree 3, which will be an E. Then we skip another note and we take the note from scale degree 5, which will be a G. These are the three notes that are in our one chord, C, E and G. If you then reference this to the notes on your ukulele fretboard, you will see that we have all of these three notes on our open strings. The C on the third string from the floor, the E on the second string from the floor, and the G on the fourth string, the one nearest our face. At the moment we also have an A on the first string, the string nearest the floor, that we don't want in our one chord. So in order to be able to strum all four strings and play a C major chord, we need to duplicate one of the notes we have on the other three strings, either a C, an E or a G, and play that on the string nearest the floor. The closest option to the open strings is a C note at the third fret. This note is an octave higher than the C on our open third string, but still a C all the same. So if we were to fret this note and strum all four strings, we have the most common shape for the C major chord that hopefully you are very familiar with. In order to find our 2 chord, we this time start from the note at the scale degree 2, which is a D, and then we skip a note and take the note from scale degree 4, which is an F, and then we skip another note and we take the note from scale degree 6, which will be an A. These are going to be the 3 notes of our 2 chord, D, F and A. If you then reference the notes on your ukulele fretboard and fret them using any open strings you're able to, or otherwise notes as close to the open strings as possible, you'll end up with this shape. We now need to duplicate one of these notes on the open G string, the one nearest our face, as we don't want that note in the chord, and the closest to the open string is an A at our 2nd fret. So if we were to fret this note as well and strum all 4 strings, we now have the most common shape for the D minor chord. For chord 3, we start from scale degree 3 and we take that note, an E, then skip a note and take the note from scale degree 5, a G, then skip another note and take the note from scale degree 7, which is a B note. These are going to be the 3 notes that are in our 3 chord, the notes E, G and B. If you then reference the notes on your ukulele fretboard and then fret them using any open strings you're able to, or otherwise notes as close to the open strings as possible, you'll end up with this shape. We now need to duplicate one of these notes on the open C string, as that note is not in the chord, and the nearest available note is another E at the 4th fret, like so. So here we have an E minor chord. You may also know this shape as a common form for E minor. The difference here is we have 2 G notes in the chord instead of 2 E notes. Either is fine. Hopefully by now you're starting to see a pattern of us taking the root note of each chord from the degree of the scale we want, and then skipping a note, taking the next one, and then skipping another note and taking the next one to give us the 3 notes of the chord. So for the 4 chord, we start at the 4th degree of the scale, an F, then take the notes at the 6th degree, an A, and the note at the repeated 1st degree, a C, giving us the notes of F, A and C. If we reference these notes on our ukulele fretboard, we have the open strings A and C available to us, an F note at the 1st fret of the 2nd string, and we can duplicate the A on the 4th string at the 2nd fret, giving us this shape, which hopefully you recognise as a standard F major shape. For chord 5, we start at the 5th degree, taking that note, a G, then skip a note and take the B at the 7th degree, and then skip another note and take the 2nd degree of the repeated scale, a D. Again, we reference these notes on our fretboard. We only have a G available to us as an open string. Then we find a B at the 2nd fret of the A string, a D at the 2nd fret of the C string, and then a duplicate of the G at the 3rd fret of the E string, and we get this shape, our standard G major chord. For the 6th chord, we take the note at the 6th degree, an A, then we skip a note and take the C at the repeated 1st degree, and then skip another note and take the E at the repeated 3rd degree, and we have the notes A, C and E. All of these notes are available to us as open strings, so we just need to find a duplicate of one of those notes on the G string, and the closest option would be an A at the 2nd fret, giving us our standard A minor shape. For the 7th chord, the final chord of the diatonic triads, and as I've said before, the most rarely used in its triad form, we take the notes from the 7th degree, a B, then skip a note and take a note from the repeated 2nd degree, a D, then skip another note and take the note from the repeated 4th degree, an F, and we have the notes B, D and F. None of these are available to us on open strings, so they'll all be fretted notes. So again, if we look for these notes as close to the open strings as possible, we find a B at the 2nd fret of the A string, the string nearest the floor, a D at the 2nd fret of the C string, and an F at the 1st fret of the E string, like so. And then we need to find a duplicate of one of these notes for the G string, and that would be a B at the 4th string, like so. A B diminished triad. This chord is probably the hardest of them all to fret, but as I said before, is used so rarely in its 3-note form that you'll quite possibly never need to play it. You'll probably notice that it's also a very similar shape to the standard G7 chord, and G7 effectively does its job much better. I'll be looking at the 7 chords in the key in a separate video. If we were then to build a chord on the repeated 1st degree of the scale, we would just end up with another C major, so we'd be back to where we started with another 1 chord. What we've just done here would work for any key, providing you have the correct notes of the major scale for that key written out. It will also work for 7th chords and other chord extensions. I'll be looking into all this in future videos. So we've now proven that the C major scale gives us the diatonic chords in their 3-note or triad form of C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and finally B diminished. So now try harmonizing the notes of the C major scale by playing each of these chords one after the other in place of the individual scale notes, like so. C, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and C. So now, in your own time, try playing these chords in any order, especially the 3 major chords, the 1, 4 and 5 chords, and the 3 minor chords, the 2, 3 and 6 chords. You'll see and hear that they all sound good together because they're all built from the notes from the key and the scale of C major. If you do want to use the 7 chord, the B diminished triad, it's generally going to sound best played just before the 1 chord, the C major, as its job is basically to resolve to that chord. So here are a few common diatonic chord progressions for you to try. If you start to try and think of them as their chord numbers rather than their actual chord name, it will eventually make playing these sequences in different keys much easier and will also help with learning songs off by heart. So pause the video here and try playing through some of these chord progressions. So we now know how to work out what the diatonic chords are in the key of C major and why they will always sound good together. As I said before, this is an important part of the basis of being able to write songs and understand how they're written. So that brings us to the end of this tutorial. If you found it helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel as I regularly post new tutorials for ukulele at all levels. Please give the video a thumbs up and feel free to leave a comment if you've enjoyed it or if you have any questions. There's also a PDF worksheet to accompany this tutorial, If you'd like a copy, if you buy me a coffee, see how to do so in the link in the description below the video, and I will email it over to you. Thanks so much for watching, and bye for now.